The Social Security earnings restriction may soon be removed. Here is what that could mean for you. A proposal currently being discussed in Congress could significantly change how millions of Americans think about continuing to work while also receiving Social Security benefits. If you have ever asked yourself whether you could remain employed, continue building your career, and still receive the Social Security benefits you spent years contributing toward, this discussion directly applies to you. And even if retirement still feels several years away, understanding this proposal today could meaningfully influence how you prepare for your eventual transition out of the workforce. The proposal is known as the Senior Citizens Freedom to Work Act of 2026. Its main purpose is simple. It would fully remove the Social Security earnings restriction for individuals who have not yet reached full retirement age but are still employed. Not lower it, not revise it slightly, not raise the threshold, but eliminate it altogether. To understand why this matters, it is important to step back and explain what the earnings restriction actually is, why it was originally created, why it still exists today, and what the practical effects could be if it were removed, because this is one of those policy discussions that sounds straightforward on the surface but contains many layers underneath that can affect your retirement timeline, your monthly benefit amount, your taxes, and even the long-term outlook of the Social Security system itself. What the Social Security earnings restriction actually means. Let us begin with the fundamentals. Social Security has an official milestone called full retirement age, which for most people today falls somewhere between age 66 and 67, depending on the year they were born. You are allowed to begin collecting benefits as early as age 62. However, if you decide to claim benefits before reaching full retirement age and you are still employed and earning wages, Social Security applies something known as the earnings test. Here is how that rule works in everyday terms. If you remain below full retirement age during the entire calendar year, Social Security temporarily withholds $1 of benefits for every $2 you earn above a specific yearly limit. In recent years, that limit has been roughly $22,000, although it adjusts over time with inflation. So if you are 63 years old, collecting benefits early, and earning $50,000 annually from work, a sizable portion of your Social Security payments could temporarily be withheld. The word temporarily matters. The money that gets withheld is not automatically gone forever. After you reach full retirement age, Social Security recalculates your benefits and credits you for the months when payments were withheld. Your future monthly checks are adjusted somewhat higher to reflect those earlier reductions. Over a long enough retirement, the system is intended to balance out reasonably closely. But here is where many people become frustrated. In the short term, the earnings test can feel like a penalty. Many individuals who continue working while collecting early benefits experience reduced monthly payments during those working years, and many people find the entire process difficult to understand. The complexity of the rules adds to the confusion. The Social Security Administration outlines numerous forms of compensation on its website, along with detailed explanations about what income counts toward the earnings limit and when it counts. Keeping track of those rules requires time and attention, both from individuals and from the administrative system responsible for enforcing them. The Senior Citizens Freedom to Work Act of 2026 would remove all of that complexity. Under the proposal, you could begin collecting Social Security at any eligible age and earn any amount from employment without losing a single dollar of benefits because of work income, where the earnings restriction originally came from. To understand whether eliminating this rule makes sense, it helps to understand why it existed in the first place. And when you look back at the history, the original reasoning was fairly understandable for the economic conditions of that era. Social Security was not originally intended to function as a general income program that people could access at a certain birthday, regardless of their circumstances. It was designed primarily as retirement insurance. And when Social Security first began, retirement had a very literal definition. It meant you had stopped working entirely. You were no longer employed. You were no longer earning wages. Retirement was viewed as a clear ending point rather than a gradual transition. In the original structure of the program, the rule was even stricter than the current version. If you were still working, you generally could not receive benefits at all. The idea was that Social Security existed to replace income that had been lost after leaving the workforce. If you were still earning income from work, then according to that original philosophy, you had not yet lost the income Social Security was designed to replace. There was also another motivation that is often forgotten in modern conversations surrounding this issue. When Social Security was created, the United States was still recovering from the Great Depression. Unemployment remained a severe national concern. Policymakers worried that older employees staying in the workforce might reduce opportunities for younger workers who urgently needed jobs. In that environment, the earnings test served two goals at once. It encouraged older Americans to step away from employment while also helping create additional openings in the labor market for younger generations. As the decades passed, both of those original arguments gradually became less persuasive. Americans started living longer. Medical improvements meant that many people in their 60s remained just as capable and productive as many people in their 50s. The idea of retirement as a complete stop from work began to feel outdated as more individuals shifted into part-time work, consulting, freelancing, or continued employment simply because they enjoyed it, rather than because they absolutely needed the money. The economy also changed the way it viewed experienced workers. Instead of seeing older employees as occupying positions that younger workers should fill, many businesses started recognizing the value of experience, mentorship, institutional knowledge, reliability, and long-developed judgment. As public attitudes and economic realities evolved, Congress gradually loosened the earnings test over time. Penalty rates became less severe. Income thresholds increased. Then, in the year 2000, Congress made a major adjustment by removing the earnings test entirely for anyone who had already reached full retirement age. From that moment forward, once a person reached full retirement age, they could earn unlimited income while still receiving their full Social Security benefits without reductions tied to work. What the Senior Citizens Freedom to Work Act of 2026 proposes is essentially the next stage of that long gradual transition. Instead of applying the earnings test before full retirement age, the proposal would eliminate it for everyone who is eligible to collect Social Security, regardless of age. When you step back and examine the broader history of Social Security, this proposal does not represent a dramatic break from the past. Instead, it continues a pattern that has been developing for more than 20 years. The funding question many people immediately ask. One of the first questions people ask when hearing about this proposal is what effect it could have on Social Security finances. That is an important and reasonable concern because the Social Security Trust Fund already faces long-term financial challenges. The system is expected to experience funding pressure in future decades as the number of retirees collecting benefits grows faster relative to the number of workers contributing payroll taxes into the program. So would eliminating the earnings test make the situation worse? In the short term, it likely would increase costs somewhat. Today, when someone claims benefits early while earning above the income threshold, part of those benefits gets withheld. That money remains inside the system longer. If the earnings test disappears, those benefits would be paid immediately rather than delayed. That means more money would leave the trust fund earlier. Over the long term, however, the impact may be more limited than the short-term picture suggests. The reason relates to how Social Security benefits are structured. The system is designed to be roughly actuarially balanced over a lifetime. If you claim benefits early, your monthly payments are permanently reduced because you are expected to receive them over a longer period of time. If benefits that previously would have been withheld under the earnings test are instead paid sooner, they are still connected to benefit amounts that were already reduced because of early claiming. The total lifetime payout does not necessarily increase dramatically. The timing simply changes. There could also be behavioral changes that influence the numbers. If the earnings test disappears, more people might choose to file for benefits earlier than they otherwise would have. More early claims mean more individuals accepting permanently reduced monthly benefits, which can reduce long-term system obligations per claimant, even while increasing the number of people receiving benefits at a given moment. A balanced assessment is that eliminating the earnings test could modestly affect the timing of trust fund outflows, because money would leave the system earlier and because more individuals might claim early. But it does not fundamentally alter the deeper structural challenge facing Social Security, which is the long-term imbalance between payroll tax revenue and future benefit obligations as the population ages. This proposal may slightly influence that larger issue, but it is not the primary cause of Social Security financial pressures, nor would it completely solve or dramatically worsen them. The biggest effect would likely be on individual decision-making. Where this proposal could have the most noticeable impact is not necessarily on the system itself, but on the choices people make about when to claim benefits and how they organize their transition into retirement. At the moment, the earnings limit acts as a real deterrent for a particular group of people. Those are individuals who have reached age 62 or older and would like to begin collecting Social Security while still earning meaningful employment income. For those individuals, the earnings limit creates a genuine financial disincentive to claim benefits early. They understand that part of their benefits could be withheld. They often view the rules as complicated and confusing, and many simply decide to wait instead of dealing with the process while they are still employed. If the earnings test disappears, that deterrent disappears as well. As a result, a meaningful number of people who currently delay filing could begin claiming benefits sooner than they otherwise would. For some individuals, claiming earlier could be beneficial. They could use the additional income to reduce financial pressure, pay down debt, increase savings, or simply improve their quality of life during their final working years. Since they would still be earning wages, they might not rely entirely on Social Security for daily living expenses, meaning the permanently reduced benefit from claiming early may not affect them as severely as it would someone who is fully retired. For others, though, claiming too early without carefully considering the long-term consequences could become an expensive mistake. The reduction in monthly benefits for claiming at age 62 instead of waiting until full retirement age can approach 30%. That reduction is permanent and remains in place for the rest of your life. If you live into your mid-80s or beyond, the total financial impact of claiming early can become significant. For many Americans, Social Security represents the only retirement income source that is both guaranteed and adjusted for inflation over time. The longer someone lives, the more valuable a larger monthly benefit can become. One concern with removing the earnings test is that it also removes one of the friction points that currently encourages people to think carefully before claiming early. Some people may benefit from that pause. The current system effectively tells higher-earning workers that if they continue earning substantial wages before full retirement age, they will not receive the entire benefit immediately. That delay sometimes gives people more time to plan and evaluate the long-term trade-offs. Whether government policy should guide behavior through rules like the earnings test is itself an important debate. There is a reasonable argument that people should be free to decide for themselves when to claim benefits without complicated restrictions standing in the way. There is also a reasonable argument that removing barriers entirely can sometimes encourage rushed decisions that people later regret, especially when those decisions involve complicated long-term financial calculations that many individuals may not fully understand in the moment. How this could change retirement timing decisions. If this proposal eventually becomes law, the decision about when to claim Social Security may become simpler and more complicated at the same time. It becomes simpler because you would no longer need to worry about your employment income causing benefits to be withheld. You could claim at age 62, continue working as much as you choose, and receive your full Social Security payment without reductions tied to wages. The technical complexity of the earnings test would disappear. At the same time, the broader decision becomes more dependent on your own judgment regarding your health, expected longevity, financial needs, and investment strategy. Without the earnings test acting as a built-in guardrail, individuals would need to perform that analysis more carefully on their own, and that analysis can be genuinely complicated. The key factors remain the same as they are for any Social Security claiming decision. How long do you realistically expect to live based on your personal health and family history? What type of investment return could you reasonably earn on the money received from claiming early? What are your expected monthly expenses during retirement, and how much of those costs must Social Security cover? Do you have a spouse whose future benefits could be influenced by your decision? And how important is the inflation-protected, guaranteed nature of Social Security compared with the rest of your retirement assets? What removing the earnings limit would do is provide the option to begin collecting while still employed, which could be genuinely useful if managed wisely. For example, imagine you are 63 years old, still working, and eligible for a monthly Social Security payment of $1,400. Receiving that benefit while also earning a paycheck creates additional possibilities. You might place the entire $1,400 into savings or conservative investments. You could use it to reduce debt. You might contribute it toward future healthcare expenses or use it to bridge the period before Medicare eligibility. Those opportunities are more limited today when work income exceeds the current earnings threshold. What you can do right now, regardless of whether the proposal becomes law. Even if this legislation never passes in its current form, there are still practical steps you can take immediately to strengthen your retirement planning. The first step is understanding your own numbers. Visit the Social Security Administration website and review your projected benefit at age 62, at full retirement age, and at age 70. Knowing those three numbers creates the foundation for any meaningful claiming strategy discussion. The second step is honestly evaluating your health and your family history. Longevity remains one of the most important variables in Social Security planning, and also one of the most overlooked. If people in your family regularly live into their late 80s or 90s, that may support waiting longer to maximize monthly benefits. If your health outlook suggests a shorter life expectancy, the calculation may look different. The third step is considering what you would realistically do with early benefits if you received them while still working. If the money would simply be spent immediately on everyday expenses, claiming early may not provide the type of financial advantage some people expect. However, if you have the discipline to save or invest those early payments carefully, even in lower risk investments, the long-term analysis may look different from the basic comparisons many people make. The fourth step is paying attention to how this legislation develops in Congress. The Senior Citizens Freedom to Work Act of 2026 has been introduced and has received attention from lawmakers interested in providing older Americans with greater flexibility. However, legislation often changes significantly during the process. Amendments may be added, timelines may shift, certain provisions could be modified before any final version becomes law. The bill that eventually passes, if it passes at all, could differ from the original proposal. The broader picture. What this proposal ultimately represents is another chapter in the long evolution of how American society views older workers, retirement, and the purpose of Social Security. The original idea of Social Security as a program meant only for people who had completely stopped working has gradually shifted toward a more flexible approach that recognizes retirement as an ongoing transition instead of a single moment. Many people move between employment arrangements. Some transition from full-time work into part-time roles. Others consult, freelance, or begin entirely new careers later in life. The old distinction between working and retired no longer reflects the reality experienced by millions of Americans. The earnings limit is a leftover from that older and more rigid system. It was designed for a period when retirement usually meant leaving the workforce entirely, and when limiting older workers in the labor market was viewed as economically helpful. Those conditions no longer describe the modern economy or the modern workforce. Removing the earnings limit would align Social Security rules more closely with how many people actually live and work today. It could provide individuals with greater flexibility and more control over their financial decisions. It could reduce administrative complexity for both workers and the Social Security Administration, and it could eliminate a rule that many people experience more as a confusing restriction than as a meaningful policy tool. The trade-off is that it would also remove one of the safeguards that currently encourages some individuals to think carefully before claiming benefits early. It could also slightly accelerate the pace at which money leaves a trust fund that already faces long-term financial strain. Whether those trade-offs are worthwhile is a legitimate public policy discussion. What is clear, however, is that understanding this proposal, understanding how it could affect your personal situation, and preparing accordingly may be one of the most valuable things you can do for your future retirement security. Social Security rules have changed many times during the last 80 years. Additional changes will likely continue in the future, and the people who stay informed about those developments and adjust their plans thoughtfully are often the ones best positioned to make confident financial decisions.